So imagine you've travelled the world by land, sea and air, and then you discover you're on an entirely different journey altogether. My guest today has gone on a quest to discover what it means to be human. Welcome to the mental space. So my guest today is no stranger to many. He is the former Vice President of Learning and Development for Etihad Airways. He now describes himself as the Chief Learning Officer for Weird Human and describes himself as a weird human. He's also a tremendous juggler. My guest today is also a judge for the Mentl Awards 2023, which if you don't know by now, and I hope you do, aims to hero organisations and individuals, anyone who's challenging the stigma of mental health and creating cultures where we can all thrive. Now, if you want any more information on the awards, please check out the show notes. My guest, of course, is Andrew Stotter-Brooks.
Scott, it's amazing to be here. I always think I should be paying you money. I should be paying you money at this point.
Now, I have a look at your CV, and it's an interesting one, and it's a fulsome one. So I'm going to let you, can you just give our audience a little bit of a flavour of your journey? How did the former assistant manager of the Bernie in Hemel Hempstead,
Yes.
many, many years ago, become the man who's sat in front of me today?
Do you know what? I think the first answer to that question is just understanding what people need from me. And that was, and it's a very selfish thing. And I suppose I started my career a little bit before Bernie Inns, but yes, no one's mentioned Bernie Inns.
So where did you start? What was the first
very
job?
long time ago, yeah. Well, I started my job sort of washing dishes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the second, my kind of first day of washing dishes, I'd kind of made a couple of conscious decisions. I don't make any lie about that, but it was always kind of doing the best I could. So I always kind of set myself genuinely, sounds a bit weird, but to try and be the best dishwasher I could be. That actually paid off massively because the owner, general manager of the hotel, her name was Yvonne, she was walking past. She basically was shocked really out of the state of the dishwash area because, quote unquote, I've never had a dishwasher as good as you, because it was spotless. And she was a bit confused because usually she'd walk past and it'd be like dishes piled up and just water everywhere and mess. And this place was just pristine and spotless. It was my first day. And then, that was when I got my kind of first promotion, really. So maybe then, I then kind of got promoted to be a waiter. So, and her first kind of question was, have you got a white shirt, a black pair of trousers and a bow tie? And I had definitely two of the three, but I had to go and buy a kind of bow tie. So quickly went home, purchased a bow tie for about 50p probably. It was only £4 a week at the time, so it was not a huge salary. And then the next day I kind of found myself rather terrifyingly in front of guests. And that's where I really learned the most important lesson in my life, which was if you can give people what they need from you, then what naturally happens is they give you something you would like. And in my situation, in that particular situation, it was gratuity, a tip, cash.
Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't unusual for me to then be taking £100 a day home in tips. Right. So I was really wealthy, in my head.
Yeah.
Because I could afford all the cans of Coke and sweets and magazines and CDs. When that wasn't CDs then, it was records, LPs and stuff. So I could all the kind of music I wanted to buy, everything I wanted, jeans, clothes, shoes, whatever I wanted, I could buy it. Because I was basically nice to people. And that's the start of my journey, Scott, yeah. After that, it just kind of escalated, really. So I kept on focusing on it. I always say the early part of my career was quite meteoric. And then I had a massive change in career where my daughter had been born, George, and I needed to try to slow my life down a bit because I was working sort of 2-3 in the morning, very, very long days. It was always evenings, it was always nights, always Sundays, working off Monday and Tuesday. I didn't see it as my future. Had an opportunity to go and work with a kind of country club, got the job, to my surprise, but then tragic news on my first day was I hadn't got the job because the incumbent hadn't decided to move. So my then boss, Dutch guy called Harm, gave me the bad news that I was effectively not news you want to hear on your first day.
No,
you don't have a job anymore. I was like, great, this is a nightmare. But he said I have a cunning plan, and his cunning plan effectively was he'd make me head of training. So this is probably about 30 at the time, and at that point.
A couple of weeks ago then.
A couple of weeks ago, yeah, that's a good one. But then I said, well, I don't have the slightest clue what you're talking about, Harm. I really have no idea what you want me to do. But my survival instinct kind of kicked in. And I thought, well, I do need a job. I do have a mortgage. I do have a daughter. I do basically need to pay some of my bills. So I thought, just shut up and just take the job. You're sort of working out. With the plan B, really, or probably my plan A at the time was go back into what I was more familiar with, which was hospitality. And then I kind of found that it was actually quite fun doing that. And I was helping people and supporting people, and I sort of had something to give. I quite enjoyed the kind of work I was doing. So that's really how it went on. So then, rather embarrassingly, 7 years later was a rugby game, had probably a glass of beer too many, with someone who I'd never really met before, called Simon. And we sort of hit it off, famously hit it off. In a rather sort of drunken stupor, Simon suggested I should be working for him. I obviously, yeah, that's a great idea. I'll work for you. Yeah, I have no idea what I was accepting. And genuinely thought it was just a joke. And then literally on the Monday morning, because it was a Sunday for this kind of Six Nations game, got a phone call from Simon. He says, can you come for your sort of like, I need to have an interview with the board. And I was like going, who am I to what? Well, back up. And then that was and then I kind of got appointed with Hilton as kind of a head of learning with Hilton, really, right. International. So my previous background, obviously with big hotels and restaurants, and then moving into obviously back into hotels, which was very, very interesting for me. So I was more of a learning perspective, but in hotels. Then, literally did that for another kind of like 7 years. Interestingly, repeatedly told I couldn't work internationally.
Why? By your wife or by?
No, definitely not by my wife. I had a long-standing ambition to work internationally. Caroline knew about that from from the beginning of our relationship, really. So but I was told I didn't have the right grit, stamina, mentality, aptitude, attributes to be like an expat. So that was kind of fascinating, kind of frustrating.
Where did that come from? How did they make that decision?
I just think that I think they just saw me as like a company man who basically was, in the home counties, and just wouldn't be a suitable candidate to work anywhere apart from the UK. Didn't really have exposure to other nationalities and cultures. Was kind of British. So that was the end of my career. And then I had an opportunity to sort of. I then joined a company called P&O, but the only slight problem with that was that I was going to have to sort of like relocate to Australia. But
from being told you can't be international to literally
going to Australia
on the side of the world.
So I thought, I'll sign that up. Much to the frustration of my wife, I think, at the time. But anyway, that's a long story. But then I went to Australia, got some exposure with kind of Vanuatuans, Australians, Indians, Filipinos, and about 200 other nationalities working on cruise ships, sailing around the South Pacific. Very, very fun period of time. And then came back to the UK fleetingly, and then got offered a job in Kuwait. So that was really, then I was really running, Pizza Hut and Burger Kings and some kind of sportswear shops and some ice cream parlors, but quite a big organisation in that kind of neck of the woods. And then 2 years later, I was actually having this conversation with Mark Colburn. We have a shared experience because Mark was very curious about that conversation. And I love you, Mark, if you're listening. But I had that really interesting conversation. He said, how have you done that? And I said, because most, in fact, every pretty much position I've had for the last 25 years, it's been the organisation approaching me and said, would you be interested in doing that role? As opposed to me sort of going to them. Because I don't believe I have the skill set to go directly. But when it doesn't matter whether it was Hilton or whatever organisation it was, or even Yvonne at the beginning, it was always, they kind of saw something in me that I, sort of like capitalised on, let's put it that way. And that was it pretty. So then, literally about 6 years ago, had a kind of phone call, very similar, from Etihad. They phoned me up, said, do you fancy this kind of gig? Had a couple of obviously, kind of chemistry sessions, conversations with them. Pretty terrifying because my background was nothing to do with aviation. Mm-hmm. When you walk into aviation for the first time, you realise that everyone has been there for 30 years. And it's really, and everyone knows everything about airplanes and everything about, below the wing and above the wing and technical and engineering. And it's all very kind of crazy. And I just thought, right, okay, let's have a go. What's the worst that can happen? And yeah, been doing that. And then most recently, obviously, that kind of journey came to an end, and I've just been sort of doing my own thing really with kind of Weird Human. Lots of other projects going on in the background, which at the moment I'd rather not kind of share, but there's a
just to maintain an air of mystery.
Yeah. There is a lot of, I have a lot of projects.
There are a couple of things there I want to pick up on, but just tell me a little bit about Weird Human. Like, you are the Chief Learning Officer of Weird Human. What's the mission with that?
The mission really is, really exploring and exposing the extraordinary in Scott, in Andrew. So I am extraordinary like everyone else, right? And I think that's really important. And I'm kind of acutely aware. And I was interviewed on TV recently about this, by an 11-year-old. It was fascinating. But her questions to me were not dissimilar, but she was really struggling with the idea that how was she going to meet a boy? How would she even talk to a boy?
Okay.
That was a bit of a concern for her. She said you can send like an emoji, or she can do a little, she can like it or something like that on her phone, on her tablet. But she didn't really know how she would going to connect with another human being. Kind of, she's obviously got a mum and dad, and this is a very, very interesting conversation, I thought, with her. And she was then saying, well, how do I do it? Andrew, how do I kind of talk to a human being face to face? That's a skill I don't have. So I think that's a real challenge for Generation Alpha as they're coming through. So you've got this generation now who are completely, increasingly isolated, don't have the natural ability. When I was a child, I was kind of interacting. I was in parks, I was running around. My whole relationship, everything was, I learned my relationship ability from that, obviously my father and mother. But it was, the next generation coming through don't have that. So exploring that is important.
We had a guest on the podcast a while back, Dr. Zoe Fortune, and she's been doing some work. She's an adjunct professor with Hong Kong University, and looking at what universities need looking at the disconnect between university graduates and what the world of work needs. And the universities seem to be pushing technical skills. And the world of work is saying to them and saying to her, we can teach technical skills, but we're getting kids who are coming through and they literally can't do this. They don't know how to look us in the eye. They can't have a conversation. They don't know how to put their hand up because they're so unconfident, because they don't communicate anymore in the way that we grew up, as you say, on the school field, or even have those jobs infrequently now. Like I as well used to wash up plates. I was not nearly as good as you and got fired quite quickly because I actually wanted to be out and talking to the customers and that sort of thing. But that kind of formative job when you're a kid teaches social skills and teaches we call them soft skills, but they're not really soft skills. They're kind of essential skills. What do you think the answer to that is?
I think the first thing is we're the sum of our experiences. That's really important for me. So every single experience that we have it's forming us and it's molding us. And I think that's because obviously our experiences kind of drive our beliefs, and that then ultimately drives kind of what we do and how we kind of manifest to the universe, whatever that is to anyone who's listening to this. And I think it's the more that we expose ourselves to experience. I've been doing last few weeks, it's been a fascinating journey for me. I've been doing lots and lots of kind of mentoring and lots of assessing, real kind of close up and personal stuff with lots of fantastically talented Emiratis. And that's been a very interesting, fascinating journey for me. I think they've found it quite interesting as well from their perspective, and perhaps we could touch on that in a minute. But I think the interesting thing for me is I often say to them, what's made you successful? Because some of these guys have been phenomenally successful in their kind of internship, or in their kind of 2-year kind of trainee rotation or whatever. And that's been fascinating. But every single one of them, it doesn't matter how successful or unsuccessful they've been in their journey today, and they're in their sort of mid-20s classically, but they all say it's absolutely relationships. And where they've been more successful or where they've really failed is in either their ability to quickly to connect with people and to understand and be comfortable enough asking questions. And actually, and the ones who are less successful, and this is, I'm not talking, it doesn't matter if it's my son or my daughter or a student from the UK. The ones who are generally less successful haven't got the ability to have the courage to ask questions. When I talk to the guys who are less successful, and they're just being assessed as being less successful by the organization. But they are saying, it's not me, Andrew, it's I'm terrified of these people because there's people like you who are walking around the building and they're very unapproachable. You know, I'm terrified of these people. They're very, very senior. They whisk into the building and they kind of whoosh out of the building. And I don't think they're very approachable. And I was actually with the CEO and in one of the meetings when we were doing an assessment for one of his team, and he just kind of said, whoa, ask me questions. You know, if I don't want to give you the answer, I'll tell you to F off. You know, I'll be straight talking. But he said, when have I ever told you to F off? You know, I'm actually going to, if you want to ask, if you really have curiosity about a question, I'd rather you be more curious. And actually then what I'm hearing repeatedly is that need to, and it sounds really crazy, but genuinely care about people. So, and they're telling me this, these are 25-year-olds, you know, millennials, right? So they're the ones who are kind of discovering only really between like 23 and 25, they're saying to me, it's really about caring. It's really about human connection. It's really about having the courage to ask questions. It's actually understanding for myself, that self-reflection, that I don't have all the answers. I don't really know everything. I think I do know everything, but clearly I don't. Yeah. But I'm the same. But I was 25 as well.
That's a powerful lesson to learn at 25, because I know some 50-year-olds in senior management positions that still haven't learned that lesson.
That's not me though. I just always think I'm quite challenging. You know, I actually had last couple of weeks I had one particular individual, and I gave some very objective feedback. I'm a little hobbit. I can be a tricky hobbit. And I'm quite observant. I'm quite present when I'm working. And I ask some difficult questions, you know, sometimes, which definitely has a habit of making people feel uncomfortable, you know. And if I'm not particularly happy with their response, because I don't think it's an honest or truthful response, then I'm quite, you know, I will kind of give them a bit more, you know, what I saw you doing and what I heard you saying and how you're making me feel is this, you know. And this particular individual got very, 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 very angry with me. You know, it's kind of like, and we kind of sort of managed it, and he sort of left the room. Then he came to my office about 5 hours later and was just incandescent with utter rage. He's 20, 25, 26, incandescent with rage, you know, and he's like, he actually physically wants to fight me, right, about my objective. And it is, you know, the definition of objective is fact, right? Yeah. It's fact. And he's incandescent because he thinks I've destroyed his career and his life's over because he's got some feedback from me. So I'm trying not to laugh, if I'm honest, but I'm keeping, you know, I'm a huge believer that I can't control what happens to me, but I can control how I respond to what happens to me. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. So I'm really keeping it kind of keeping it straight. And inside I'm kind of like thinking, this is actually quite comical. But I said, let's go and have a chat about this, because I really want to listen to what you're saying. I want to hear what you're saying and want to kind of feel, you know, help me understand how you're feeling at the moment. We started to have that conversation. And I said, let's just reflect on the moment. Let's just think about what's happening right now. Yeah. I don't want to talk about what's happening now. I want to talk about your comments in that assessment earlier. I was like, yeah, I know, but just humour me for a second. Let's just talk about what's happening right now. So I want you to reflect on that. You know, how are you making me feel in this conversation? Because honestly, how I'm feeling right now is I'm feeling terrified. Because what? I'm feeling utterly terrified. Yeah. I'm an expat. You know, I don't know. There was no intention to offend you in any way, shape, or form. There was an intention to be honest, and my feedback earlier came from a position of love. So I want to help you grow and develop. You know, if you're going to respond like that, you know, let's just talk about that. You know, when you're responding very emotionally, very angrily to people who are providing feedback from a position of love that's based in real objectivity, if you attack people when they give you that feedback, what happens to that feedback in the future? Well, I'm not going to get any. I said, yeah, you're not going to get any. Good. So how does that kind of change this situation? Well, I want feedback. I'm like, good. So in the future, if you're getting very emotional, because right now I'm hearing you shouting, I'm seeing you getting red in the face, I'm hearing you threatening me with all sorts of, things. And eventually slowly sort of coming down, it's like going, actually, I'm probably the first person in 25, 26 years really giving me some feedback, right? So it takes a lot but for me to do that, that takes courage, right? Because it does take a lot of courage. And he couldn't really understand, once we had that conversation, he could start to understand the dynamic there, which was really interesting. So that is really why it's trying to explore the extraordinary. And that's why I'm such a big fan of that kind of weird human. It's a bit edgy, but I like the idea of it being a bit edgy because it's starting to reflect on, it just makes people think about the uniqueness of our species. And I think that's a really important message. We're constantly hearing about, AI coming in and taking our jobs and writing for us and flying for us and driving for us and doing any other kind of like job you can imagine. And it seems to me that the only thing we're going to be kind of left with is really our own ability to connect and build rapport with people, right? And actually making the decision to instruct the AI to do something. Because I think that's what we forget as human beings. Our role will be more directing the AI to solve problems. It can't make its own mind up about how I'm going to, it can't solve a problem without being directed. Again, it's great at solving the problem. It's great at writing an article to a degree. It's great at driving a car. It can do that, but it can't make the decision about where it's going. It doesn't
for now, we hope.
But it does. Yeah. So that's an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that. Yeah. But that's, I think at the moment we have to, it's a bit like AI is for people who are really fearful of AI, I think AI is a bit like fire and AI is a bit like water and AI is a bit like electricity, right? So, you're listening to this on a device, or we're surrounded by lights and we've got, water. We know about water. All of those things, that electricity that you've harnessed, that fire that humanity has harnessed, that kind of water that we have harnessed, actually all of those three things could simply kill you. It could easily kill you. You could drown in it. You could burn to death. Horrible, nasty things could happen if you stick your finger in that socket. You're going to get hurt. So humanity has managed to harness the power of those things. Humanity just needs to harness the power of AI and use it for our own. But we need to be mindful. We take precaution around electric. We take precaution around water. We put these safety rings out by pools, right? We make sure the pools are shallow enough. Yeah, we just have to start thinking as a species. And the more that we explore the extraordinariness that makes us who we are, the easier it becomes then to sort of like control those the things around us, and including AI.
So who are you then? What makes you extraordinary or weird?
I don't think I am extraordinary or weird. I think I'm just the same as everyone else. I think I am extraordinary and weird like everyone else. I think that's the most important thing. I'm not singling myself out as being better than anyone. I'm just saying that we are all extraordinary. We are all weird. I'm perhaps brave enough to say that I'm weird. Most people probably would, in their own bathroom, would probably admit they are a bit weird. They're a bit different, But that's what we should be celebrating. We should be celebrating. We don't want to be autonomous and the same. We don't want to. I don't think we should be celebrating the fact that we're all the same as everyone else. Much as you're a very handsome man, Scott, I don't want to be Scott. I'd like to be.
I can hardly blame you for that.
I would like to be me, and I think that is something that I have struggled with my entire career, and I think it's something that every person who's having a career or at any stage of that career, they also struggle with being authentic. Yeah,
that's fascinating, because I think that's a journey that a lot of people are perhaps yet to go on, or I think a lot of people are struggling with that right now. When we look at, the level of mental health, the crisis in the world that we've got, 1 in 3 people in the UAE struggling with their mental health. For the longest time, I didn't want to be Scott. For the longest time, and social media keeps showing us pictures of other people who seem to, that person seems to be better. And we've had this conversation before, Andrew, that whenever I've met you in the past, you always seem to be the bombastic, uber confident, super smiley, got it all together human being. But as we've got to know each other, I know you're more complicated than that. And you've got your fragilities just as I have got those fragilities. But so many of us are not looking in the mirror. We're not giving ourselves that feedback. How do you think that plays into the mental health situation that human beings are finding themselves in? Because this is not unique to the UAE or indeed this region. The global figures tell us 1 in 4. Okay, here in the UAE, for a number of factors, it's 1 in 3. We look at the figures on suicide last year, 700,000 people killed themselves last year. 77% of them were men. So there's something going on there.
I think there's a couple of things. I think first of all, for me, mental illness is like it's a cold. We can all get it, 100%. I think also that there's even once upon a time we call it having a mental breakdown, or it was always a thing that was women kind of got, men didn't get it. It was tied to kind of our emotions, and I think that's a challenge. I think the problem is we're constantly being benched against what people think we should be. I look at the organizations I've worked for in my career. There's always going to be that, and there's always going to be that kind of like what the organization is looking for, and then when I then assess and evaluate employees, and I've done this in most continents now. I'm very, very privileged in my career. Yeah. So I've worked in lots of different places around the world, which is amazing. And but people are still the same. There's too much what I would call masking. People aren't brave enough to be authentic, and that's something I personally, some people, I got described recently by a CEO who are a bit like Marmite stocks, because there's not much in the middle for you. It's either people absolutely hate you, stocks, or they actually love you. I grant you, the vast majority of people like you, or love you. There are definitely haters out there, but I think the haters are because they can't get over who I am, and I want to be who I am. And I'm not going to conform to who they want me to be. So I think
that's difficult for the kids coming through. I think but it's difficult for lots of people on sort of the corporate treadmill, isn't it? That how do you remain authentic when organizations are telling you, well, this is what we want, this is the type of person we want you to be, and if you want to rise through the ranks, you're going to have to park some of your values, some of your aspirations, some of what's important to you. And we went together on a men's retreat that Mentl organized with the Lighthouse in Ras Al Khaimah, and there were guys on that retreat as well who would basically just say, I thought I'd lost myself and I'm on my way back, but they got lost along the way.
And I think and you just have to sort of like seek help, but it's back to, we're, again, it's kind of uncomfortable truth, but we are really animals. We're mammals, right? And mammals, like they need connectivity. They need to be together. They need to be part of the pack. They need to feel, they need to belong, right? And I think that's the other thing. So that is being eroded over time. Our ability, and COVID hasn't helped, but I think it's an excuse again, but it hasn't really helped that. But again, we have to get back to being, mammals, back to being, connecting. I want to, it sounds a bit kind of, again, a bit weird, but I want to be able to smell you, touch you, feel you, understand you, because that's really where the connectivity is. And I think if you start to understand, that's why that particular day was so kind of impactful for me, because I suppose I kind of knew it, but there was such a distinguished group of individuals who were there that day, and listening to their kind of stories, it made me kind of reflect. I think I was kind of sharing my experiences last that day, which is really useful for me. But it was listening to them, it just suddenly made me feel that I wasn't really alone, and I think, and I don't think we are. We think we are. We think we are, and we genuinely are not. And back to my kind of the CEO comments a few minutes ago. People, they might see Scott or they might see Andrew as this kind of like bombastic, confident, man or whatever. But the reality is I'm just as fragile as anyone else. And actually I'm definitely approachable. And I would never tell anyone to kind of F off. If someone comes and asks me a question, I'm desperate to help. Someone says, can you please, be my mentor? Can I be, part of that? I'm incredibly flattered that people do it, and a lot of people do it, which is lovely. it does put a lot of strain on me, but I also kind of feel that I want to help other people. So I get so many people, but I think the challenge is that when people come to me and they say, well, I want you to be my mentor, they somehow believe that I have like this kind of magic kind of pixie dust or kind of Stotts dust that I can sprinkle on people. Yeah. And I think I wish I did have it because I wouldn't be sitting here. But I don't have pixie dust. I don't have magic dust that I can sprinkle on people. When I then challenge their own behavior and how they respond to what's happening around them, I think that's when the challenge comes. Because they go, well, I can't. And we were just chatting, about juggling again earlier before we kind of did this. And it's, often when we juggle, I always use that as a metaphor, but there's a particular part in juggling when people really kind of struggle because the way that we are formed through experiences. We are a sum of our experiences. And of course, those experiences are used as our kind of playbook, our guide to life. Yeah. So therefore, every time that we're giving another human being an experience, it's really important that we're really focusing on making sure that's a positive experience. How I react to bad news or good news. I said, I can't control the universe. I can't control the weather. I can't say, I wish it wasn't as hot tomorrow, or I wish tomorrow I'd love it to snow in Dubai or snow wherever it is. But the reality is I can adapt to the weather. Yeah. So I can adapt to it being cold. I can adapt to it being hot. I can adapt to it being wet. So I have to adapt to it. I can't control the greater forces of the universe. And I think that's a really important point when people are trying to, looking to me for the pixie dust, and I'm then kind of challenging them, saying actually it's not really what's happening to you. It's how you're dealing with how you respond to that. I think that's so important. There's a guy, Viktor Frankl,
Man's Search for
I love it. But that whole, he was persecuted by the very nasty group of people in history. And, when you read that and all the nasty, horrendous things that were being done to him, and he, famously said that, the greatest opportunities between what we call stimulus and response. So he's recognizes the stimulus. They're trying to do nasty things to him, taking horrible things, doing really nasty things, killing his family, restricting him, isolating him, punishing him. But he said they can't take away how I respond to that. And that's the thing that frustrates people the most. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that frustrates, that's what my haters don't like. They don't like the idea that they try to hate me, but I kind of, I'm like, okay, it's fine. If you can do what you want, that's fine. I'm not
difficult to hate someone that doesn't hate you back.
It's very, very hard. Someone stormed up to me the other day. They came storming up to my desk. Now, a totally other person. You think there must have a lot of people out there. And I'd never met this person at all. And he's a French guy, really a lovely guy. It transpires, an amazing Frenchman. And he comes storming towards me. And I'm like, oh, crikey, what's going to happen now? And he starts attacking me. And I said, God, you're fit. And he, and not in a bad way, but I said, God, you are so fit. And because he was like super, super fit bloke. And I, as in like healthily fit. And he was like completely like, he goes, what? And I goes, God, how do you stay so fit? And he starts talking about kite surfing and he starts talking about his cycling and his triathlons and that kind of stuff. I said, that's amazing. Yeah. And then suddenly he was kind of out of it, out of that kind of like, what we call parent behavior. And he's coming down and he's going, yeah, anyway, can you ask a couple of questions about this? I was like, no, of course, just help me out. So he sort of comes straight down from like kind of like really aggressive parent down to this like nice adult. I'm like, yeah, no, of course, let me, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. I'm like, cool, need anything else? Let me know. I think so, but I could have just gone back and said, don't you talk to me like that.
Yeah.
Don't you?
And then you go from DEFCON 1 to DEFCON 2 to DEFCON 3 to, yeah.
He can be angry with me, that's fine, but I'm not going to rise to that kind of anger because I'm choosing to respond I have the power of that. Everyone listening to us right now has the power to choose how they respond. And is it easy? Absolutely not. Does it help if you practice? Absolutely. And think about when people are giving you bad news. I mentioned a guy called Harm Teglaz earlier. Harm taught me a very important lesson, because he always said to me, Stotts, the measure of my success is really how quickly I get the bad news. Because actually, if I get the bad news really fast, and if people are really comfortable giving me bad news, then actually I can deal with it, and we can sit there and we can solve the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is if people aren't prepared to give me bad news because they're scared of me. They're worried about what I'm going to say, how I'm going to react, am I going to fire them? So therefore they keep the bad news to themselves. And of course then it just festers, right? So getting the bad news out there as quickly as you possibly can and being comfortable doing that, but allowing other people, I'm lucky, I'm a boss person now, but allowing other people to come to me with their problems and share those problems. I'm definitely not going to fix them because that's not my MO at all, but definitely I want to listen to them and then at least give them some, guide them and have to ask them some questions. And it's just back to being able to sort of I am weird, but being able to smell me and feel me and touch me and understand me and connect with me is really important. Some of my haters say, you rely too heavily on your ability to build relationships. And is that a bad thing? Maybe it's an overplayed strength. I'm aware that I am naturally good at that. So why would I not try and play to my strengths? But I'm also aware that perhaps I can use it too much in what I'm trying to do. But it's response. Sorry, I'm waffling. Please forgive me.
No, it's fascinating. It's just, you seem to have, I'm sorry, I'm not going to turn this into a therapy session, but a lot of conversation about the haters and your response to them. That just interesting. What about the people that love you? What would they say?
They would be completely incredulous that anyone would not like me at all. That's probably what they would say. Because I think it's having the time for people.
Yeah.
And I said that it's just a small one. It's always been, if you spoke to my wife about this, she would say there's a kind of recurring theme. But I think that's because I absolutely insist on being authentic. Right. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to try and change because 1 or 2% of the population doesn't like me. Yeah. I will be who I am. I will engage with you. I will, my father, we've probably had this conversation before, but I have 4 very, very simple values, which I completely bore people with. But number 1, just respecting people. No one has to earn my respect. I give it freely. It's yours. Doesn't matter. I don't care who you are. I really have no interest in who you are. You have my undying respect. You're another human being, and even if you're a hideous person, because I think if you're a hideous person and you're not a very respectful person, you probably need my respect more because you probably need the love, more than most people. But being really, really respectful, I think, is important. I think number 2, just hearing people, listening to them, asking them a few questions. It's amazing how I go to dinner parties and I just sit and sometimes it's freaking hell, it's exhausting. And I listen to people talking and I ask a few questions. I kind of go to work mode a bit more, but I listen to, and at the end of the evening they'll say, "Oh my God, what an amazing guy." I'm like, I haven't even spoken to that person all night. I've listened to them, so, but being very respectful, listening and hearing to people is really important. Making sure that everyone gets smiling at strangers. I say 90% of great conversations for me come out of just smiling at a stranger, paying a compliment. I can't tell you how powerful paying a compliment is and smiling at someone is, because and those beautiful exchanges with humanity when you do those things. And then just being really kind of remembering people, because people really, really appreciate that you've just remembered a little bit about them. I've got a friend who's just lost his father, and it's, but just connecting and just kind of being there in the background, just occasionally just sending them. It's difficult because I think I've just been through it myself. When you lose your father or your mother, it's pretty horrendous, right? And I think a lot of people don't really know how to deal with it, so they kind of almost run away from it, right? So it's like, well, I don't know, because Andrew's lost his dad. I don't know how to deal with that, so I'm just going to not deal with it. I'm just going to kind of disappear, right? But it doesn't take very much just to have a little tiny bit of connection. So most of the humanity would sort of run away because I don't want to face the reality of I'm going to die. But actually kind of running towards it. So I'm always trying to run into it. And the more I kind of, in my life, the more I run into it, the easier it becomes. I think I kind of realize that people aren't really that horrendous out there, Anyway, I'm just waffling.
It almost feels like a mic drop moment. I'm going to keep going. You talk about your dad. What was the biggest lesson your dad taught you?
I think definitely. I remember getting told off really when I was very, very young. Where I come from, they have a thing called grockles. You know what a grockle is?
I have no idea what a grockle is.
Okay, grockles. I obviously, my dad's listening to me now. Please forgive me, Dad. But it's just a point of reference. But so grockles is what kind of like so Devon, Cornwall, Dorset. They would call kind of tourists.
Okay, right.
So a grockle is a tourist. It's a slang, local slang for people who basically come on the beach and they don't pay council tax, or they basically just come around for the day. And I remember, because obviously I worked in the hotel sector on the beach for years, and or in that.
You kind of needed the grockles.
You need exactly, and that was kind of a lesson my dad said. You actually need those grockles, Andrew. So being disrespectful of those people is actually, you actually want them to give you money. And that was a big part of my, and again, it's back to my kind of my selfish nature, but giving people what they needed. We kind of led with that at the beginning. If you give them what they need, and then basically they tend to have this habit of giving you what you need.
Reciprocity.
Yeah.
Which is a difficult word to pronounce.
Yeah. I kind of break it down. I'm not even going to say it because it's kind of a real struggle, but it's a real fascinating one. And getting people to yes, for me, is amazing. So if I always say university graduates, I speak at a lot of universities, and a lot of universities come and visit me. No idea again why, but they're very curious. And one of the things that they're most curious about, they use this word called the hack. Right? What's the hack to success?
The shortcut.
What's the shortcut? And I'm looking at them going, I don't think there is a hack really, but and I kind of, it sort of, again, I can't stop them saying it, and I can't ask them asking the question. So I kind of humour them with the answer. But I always say, I don't think there really is a hack. I mean, you have to work really hard. I think that's really important. I think, the more you understand what people need from you, the easier it becomes. And it's when you walk into it doesn't matter what you're buying, if it's jeans, shoes, a holiday, a flight, whatever it is you're buying, you're staying in a hotel, actually thinking about, if the person selling that hotel room or whatever it is actually asks you what you need, and they listen to you for a few seconds. So what's important about the hotel room? What's important about the trainers or the jeans? Because I want to look devilishly handsome in my jeans. So of course that's an important point. So of course, if the person then gets me a pair of jeans and says you're going to look devilishly handsome in these jeans, I'm much more likely to buy them, right? Particularly if she's cute or he's cute or whatever, and she, they want to kind of like sell you. They're kind of engaging with you. So it sounds crazy, but being a little bit understanding what people need, it helps your kind of selfishness, because you also need to be able to feed yourself and grow and develop. So it's one of the first lessons for me that my dad kind of taught me, actually giving people what they need. And I think the other thing that amazed me, I mean, this whole area which I still find completely staggeringly amazing, is my father. I probably told you the story before. I try and keep it really short, but a few years ago, I was back in the UK. My dad had failing eyesight, and he was saying, "Oh, Andrew, I was only in the UK for a fleeting moment, but he said, could you do me a favour? Can you drive me to to this kind of hair appointment?" He's early 80s when this conversation's happening. And I'm like, Dad, I said, there's so many things that worry me. There's so many things that worry me about this conversation. But of course I will drive you to go and cut this woman's hair, because obviously, but I said, Dad, should you be doing this? Haven't you got better things to do with your life than go and, you're 80 something and, you're still going out on a Saturday afternoon cutting this freaking woman's hair. And, I said, first of all, you're putting out health and safety. It's health and safety. You're going to like cut her head off or cut her nose off or cut her ear off or something. That's a bit of a concern for me. And they were sort of laughing about that. But then I said, the reality is, Dad, that, he's saying, Andrew, stop. He goes, I've been cutting this woman's hair for 60 years. Every Saturday for 60 years, she's come in and I've had I've been with this woman more than I've been with your mother. Right, I know this woman. Yeah, she won't let anyone else touch her hair. Right, she's in her 90s. I'm in my 80s. It's kind of what we do. Yeah. Right, she pays me money. That's not really important, but it's the loyalty, and I think it's that kind of completely
human connection again.
It's human connection again. So a kind of recurring theme. And my dad didn't have. I mean, Dad had a couple of salons, and he was successful. Rented out kind of barbers' chairs and that kind of stuff. But the reality of they were never in main high streets. They were never kind of like, high kind of like retail value locations. But it was always but people didn't need to have the high, because they were finding that store because they loved my dad, right? And they loved that they loved the connection. I mean, I was chatting to, I was talking to the, crazy conversation, but I was talking to the head of the ILM a couple of days ago, and then we were having a not dissimilar conversation to this, and then she obviously used to work for the Samaritans, right? So there's a bit of kind of like a trend there. But she said, the best profession, if you want to find people to join the Samaritans, the number one profession is hairdressers. Because you're coming in, and we know pretty much guaranteed that if you've been a hairdresser in your life, you are going to be able to listen, connect, build rapport. It's very intimate. It's quite personal what you're doing. Yeah. And actually having a conversation and being able to read the person who's in the chair, male or female. And it's amazing. So, and that's back to, again, human connection. People just don't feel, they want to smell, they want to touch, they want to feel, they want to be, they're mammals. We're mammals. We want to touch each other. We want to feel each other. We want to be in the presence of others. If we're isolated, it causes us massive distress.
It causes us physical harm.
Physical harm. So we need to go and get into other people, but stop being terrified of that. Stop thinking that if I go and say, can we have a conversation start? So I'm going to say F off, because I absolutely am not. And I don't think the vast majority of humanity would say F off. They genuinely wouldn't. But there's something that stops us. But, it's we have to get better at doing that. And that's back to my 11-year-old friend. We just have to train Generation Alpha and Generation Z. They're going to inherit the world. They're going to inherit the earth, right? We need to basically make sure that they're in a good place to do it. So.
It's only fair for me to ask, what lessons have you learned from your mum?
That's a great question. So my mother is just the most amazing woman. So incredibly, I mean, even now, you wouldn't believe how old she is, but she's just an incredibly engaging, caring, kind of ran our home, really. So she ran, I think that was something I really value about my wife. That ability, I think a lot of people kind of dismiss it as, well, that's just rubbish. But that's just not, because we've got, there's kind of 3 hard-working adults that live in our house. And my wife is the 4th hard-working adult, but her main focus is really making sure that we had the stability in our lives. And I think that was, what my mother did. It was that kind of, creating that stability for us to kind of thrive, really. Creating the stability for my father to kind of strive. She had her own businesses as well. So, how she managed to juggle her own businesses and then still be kind of creating that safe kind of environment where we could kind of grow. Quite honest with us. I think that's also a really big learning thing. So I think being very honest with us was very useful. Telling us when we were disappointing her, or kind of giving us kind of direction and being quite objective with us. That also kind of give us a bit of a steer.
So you were getting that objective feedback,
when
you were a child.
Yeah, which I think that helps, because you get used to, again, it's that experience and that kind of practice, right? And then trying to manage how you feel, about when you're getting that kind of that information. It's something that my wife always says about me. She says, what I always, people are kind of queuing up to give you an opinion. It's amazing. I don't know, it happens to you, but it happens to me quite a lot. So I'm kind of walking somewhere,
Nobody cares what I think.
Honestly, I'm walking through a mall and someone will come and run up to me and they'll either, sometimes it's a bit weird because they kind of like hug me and stuff and they say, I really love you, Andrew. And my wife's kind of going, who the fuck is she? And I'm kind of going, no idea, babe, still. I'm really true. And well, she's hugging you, so you must know her. I'm like going, yeah, I don't really know, because I think sometimes that's a bit scary, because sometimes people, they seem to know you better than, they seem to know you, but you don't really know them, which is amazing because of the touch you kind of have. And I think you don't underestimate how people are listening to you. But I think it's, sometimes the feedback is lovely, and occasionally people will come in and they'll say horrible things to you. I've been an HR manager for the best part of my entire life. So everyone thinks HR is all kind of like, rose tinted glasses and it's all lovely and kissing and shaking hands and high-fiving people. There's some pretty other stuff, some stuff out there which we have to do in our world, which isn't that nice sometimes. I spent, a significant part of my career doing a sort of George Clooney. There's a movie Up in the Air, I've told you before, flying around and firing people.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes there is some baggage, but it's trying to manage that. But she was a kind of, again, it's back to my earlier thing where she was a bit surprised about how well I respond to that kind of negativity, because I could easily just shout them and punch them and be angry. But again, I can't control them running up to me.
Do you find the negativity easier to deal with than the positivity?
I would say absolutely yes.
Because a couple of times, it's just interesting, like when you say, oh yeah, people come up to me, but ask me for my opinion, but I've no idea why. And it's exactly the sort of thing I would do, where you could say, is that British self-effacing thing? But actually, I think I struggle with compliments. If someone pays me a compliment, my standard response is, I'm really sorry. My imposter syndrome's kicking in, so it makes it difficult for me to accept the compliment. But thank you so much. I appreciate the gift of that. But I do always feel the need to just respond to that and go, yeah. Whereas if someone's calling me whatever, then it feels almost more like a natural state. It's something I'm more used to getting and receiving. So why do you think, what is it about you that you find the negativity easier to deal with than someone paying you a compliment?
I think I just beat myself up.
Yeah.
I think it's just, I'm the most insecure person. I'm very, I have raging imposter syndrome. I think most people, most weird humans, and that's every single human being, has raging imposter syndrome. I think that kind of keeps you in check to a degree as well, because there's going to be some really sort of narcissistic people out there who probably don't have imposter syndrome. But I think most of humanity is slightly concerned. I was chatting to some people who are coming out of the army recently, and they were saying, how do we? They're leaving the army, quite senior positions in the army, and really kind of struggling to come into kind of civvy street, if it's still called that. And it was fascinating. They don't feel they're adding massive value. And they kind of feel that I'm kind of cheating being here, because I'm not really achieving very much. And well, it's kind of, first of all, you're quite early in kind of civvy street, and also a lot of them seem to think that it's very hard to find a job. And I can empathise with that. And it's always, but it's that, how do you kind of build the relationships? How do you connect with people? Because it's much easier if someone is kind of, asking you for feedback or asking you to engage than you trying to ask to engage, if that makes sense. But yeah, I've tried to learn to say thank you. So when people give me, I've got a couple of really good friends who actually have flagged that with me before. And they said, you just need to say thank you.
Yeah.
Because you're very good at saying, when they're being very negative to you, you're very good at saying, thank you for the feedback. Yeah. But when they're being very positive about you, you need to say, oh, thank you for the feedback. It's lovely. Yeah. So thank you for the feedback, Scott.
I'm going to ask you, you've been very generous with your time. I'm just going to ask you two more questions, if I may. And one, I just want to pick up on something and get that kind of HR, talent, human dealing with human beings perspective. I was asked recently just to contribute some thoughts as to whether quitting your job for your mental health is the right thing or the wrong thing. And my opinion is that it's not. If you're quitting a toxic environment, it's not necessarily a sign of failure. It's not necessarily a sign of a lack of resilience. It's actually that you value yourself more, or that you've recognized that a situation no longer aligns with your values or your aspirations. It got published. I shared it on LinkedIn yesterday, but I was a bit surprised just how much reaction there was to that. And it felt like it actually hit a chord with quite a lot of people. So I just really want to get your thoughts, about leaving toxic environments, and what have you seen the corporate world get wrong in terms of toxic environments? Are people right? Because it's not easy. You talked before about the responsibilities, the mortgage, the kids, the school fees. Oh, the school fees. Let's not talk about daughter's wedding and what that might cost.
Yeah.
But it's not easy to leave a situation with all these different pressures and roles and responsibilities. But what do you tell people if they come to you for advice on that one?
I think there's this is a conversation I have quite a lot. I think the years between 25 and 45 are really hard. So suck it up. That's the first thing. I think you need to find something you really love. And I think too often I come across people who are they have natural attributes or natural talents in certain areas, and they tend to find themselves in the wrong kind of locations. I also find that and probably, I was actually chatting to Mark Colvin about this first thing this morning. I kind of also feel that we are, as kind of bosses, we are almost like parents to our employees. I know that's a bit, I don't mean to oversimplify that, but we are, we're kind of role models to them. So therefore, I think the challenge is that when we are very, if we're giving people bad experiences, we're bullying them, we're harassing them, we're not listening to them, we're not connecting with them, we're not asking them how they are, we're texting them at stupid o'clock in the morning or stupid o'clock at night, and we're basically texting, we're sending them making requests at 4:30 on a Friday to get something that's really important for a board meeting on so-and-so, you're inadvertently just kind of really screwing with that person, right? And you might not necessarily realize you're doing it, but I think sometimes people it's almost like a power play with you. So you have to, but bigger and probably more important than that is that I am probably I've learned most from my parents, right? So you learn from them, and I think my two children, I'm incredibly proud of my two children, Harry and George. They learn most by watching your behavior, right? So I think if an employee is watching a boss who is being nasty, narcissistic, dictating, bullying, harassing, sending messages, at stupid o'clocks, at weekends. I remember getting this email on Christmas Day from a boss. Actually, it's so funny. It would be Christmas laughing. I think it had my world record, had 45 exclamation marks and question marks on Christmas Day on the 25th of December. And I just remember how that totally destroyed my Christmas.
Yeah.
And it was just, that was a strategic.
With nothing more, no more clues as to what the issue was.
There was like a stupid statement about some sort of cost or something, and it was just like a stupid statement about a cost that we'd incurred. It was ridiculously low amount of money, but some sort of stupid message, and it completely ruined pretty much the entire period. I was at Christmas Day lunch. I was at it was lovely, having a really nice time with my family. I was an idiot for opening my phone, but it destroyed the next 2 weeks. Because I was just terrified about going back in the office, And so if employees of the future believe that behavior makes people successful, they're going to replicate that behavior.
Abuse become the abuser.
Yeah, and because you just say, I'm going to.
And then this cycle of toxicity just continues.
So you have, that's again back to what I would, and I know it's really hard, but that's why I would much prefer to be, engaging with everyone in the office, talking to people, saying good morning, making space for them, listening to them, recognizing when they're unhappy or disappointed, recognizing when we're putting a lot of pressure on them to get stuff done. Actually, when people really kind of buy into what you're trying to do, I think they naturally give of themselves, if that makes sense. But you have to role play. So I have to. The word I would, but walk the talk. So I like to walk the talk. I like to do what I say. Because I can't, and so many bosses I've had who just absolutely don't do that. They just, this is what other people should be doing. I'm now beyond that. I sit in my office, I sit at my desk, I put my blinds down, I lock my door. I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm going to sneak in. Gosh, the amount of bosses I see kind of like, they almost come in like was under stealth, trying not to make eye contact.
Not wanting that connection, not wanting to be stopped.
Don't come and talk to me, And the body language is down, the hunched shoulders, the eye contact, the staring forward. And sometimes when you, and unfortunately for me, that's like red rag to a bull. So, so I'm like kind of like jumping in front and I go, morning, saluting. And they're like, what's the matter with you? I'm like going, oh, it's a lovely day, happy Monday, and they go, walk into their office and close the door.
Is that a naval salute or is that a...
It's just me taking the piss salute. But I can't, honestly, my son's got the same infliction, which basically is we cannot, when we see really bad behaviour in front of us, we tend to like call it out.
Yeah.
And I know it's incredibly dangerous, but I just think, no, what the heck, I'm doing it. And I think that's that. Also, I'm being slightly flippant here, but that's where some of the haters come from, because I don't like being called out on the behaviour. So when you're really calling it out in front of people, they, of course, that type of individual who's very narcissistic, who's basically insular, who doesn't really care about people, when their behaviour is actually being published, and shown, and people are kind of like, maybe, I'm not making
I can
fun.
picture the face of a certain individual that I used to work for. So I know exactly what you mean.
They don't like it.
No.
Right? So therefore they don't like being called out on there, because I think the truth hurts, Scott. The truth hurts. So we agree. Yeah, I think as we've got to be, as bosses, we have to set an example for the future. We have to make sure that Generation Z and Alpha are comfortable asking us questions. We have a duty of care towards them. They're going to inherit the earth. Good luck to them. They have to, so we have to make sure that we're setting the example for them. And if we're setting the example that is, I'm not going to talk to you, I'm going to harass you, I'm going to send you ridiculous emails at stupid times of day, I'm not going to say good morning to you. It's amazing. Yeah, it's just absolutely amazing how it kind of like eats away at people. My son-in-law, he sent me a WhatsApp the other day, and he was making a joke about going to Las Vegas, and I get 1 trillion WhatsApp messages, and I get 4 trillion emails, and I get voice notes, and I get people. It's I love it. Let's be honest, I do love it. But the reality is, I do sometimes I skim them, right? And I made a classic mistake of kind of skimming this particular one. She was making a joke about running away to Las Vegas with me, right? And I just kind of skimmed it. Didn't really see much about it. And I obviously opened the WhatsApp, right? And then like 2 weeks later, my daughter's saying, Dad, Alan thinks he's really offended you. I'm like going, in what way would Alan ever think that is possible? Yeah. He said, well, he sent you a text message, he sent you a WhatsApp message about running away with you to Las Vegas first class and that kind of, and you said you didn't respond to it, because it was, and
he's seen the 2 double blue ticks, and he knows you've read it.
He knows I've read it, right? And then he's looking, he goes, well, obviously I've now offended my father-in-law, this is a disaster, and now he's terrified of talking to me. And it's not like, I think sometimes
it's amazing the stories we can tell ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Oh, Scott, that's what I'm trying to get. It's amazing what we can tell ourselves about that situation. And it's not the reality, because we have those double blue ticks, right? And we go, well, he's seen it and he hasn't responded. It's like a week and a half since he's responded to that. It's not the fact that I haven't responded to you. It's just that sometimes it's like, I've got 1 trillion other things going on. It's nothing personal against Scott.
It's fascinating. Like, even how we boil down communication to such a tiny granular thing. But the anxiety I felt in my life, watching the word typing, from a boss, or indeed Mrs. Armstrong, on those two blue ticks, or sometimes you look at messages from people and you go, I deliberately can't read that, because if I read it, they'll see I've read it, and then they'll be expecting a response. And it's like, we've boiled communication down to such a small level, and yet it's still so complicated.
And it's just, I can assure you now, I've been really, with some of my communication, I've been really, 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 really burnt. I think the only way to really learn about communication is by getting burnt. You can read about great communication in textbooks, and you can watch people who are good at it, but until you physically get burnt by poor communication, like on extreme burnt, you'd...
What's the old phrase? Was it dance like no one's watching?
Yeah.
Sort of WhatsApp and email like you're going to be in court.
Yeah, and I've got at least 2 or 3 situations in my life where I've just genuinely felt that I was, seconds away from being fired. Because it's just, it kind of terrifies me, because a lot of people, I have this nasty habit, or good habit, or bad. I don't care. It's my habit. But putting a lot of hearts in my messages, right? And I do it on everything. I do it on LinkedIn. I do it all in my WhatsApp messages, So if you grab my phone, you go through and you see every single person.
And here was me thinking I was special.
Yeah. Sorry to break that bubble for you, to burst that bubble. And actually get people do say, oh my gosh, actually, you got to be careful, Andrew, about that. Because I even read in The Sun the other day, actually, some manager had sent some employee. It was like an employment tribunal in London. And one of the points where the Sun and he sent a heart to me in an emoji heart. And I was reading that in the Sun newspaper, British tabloid, and kind of felt a cold chill went through me. I was thinking,
Last question. You have generously agreed to be a judge for the Mentl Awards.
Why wouldn't you?
Well, I'm going to ask the question just for anybody that's watching. Why should they enter? Why did you agree to be a judge, other than you're just a terribly nice human being?
It's just the single most important thing is our mental health, and it just being, and just, showcasing and encouraging and, promoting any human being that is able to and willing to kind of like, put that at the forefront. It is the, for me, my mother kind of struggled with mental health. I massively struggle with mental health. It's a constant sort of battle for us. And I think, anyone who kind of, it's really close to my own heart. So of course, flattered, honoured, and delighted to be involved in the project, Scott. Genuinely, yeah. So it was if I could have responded before the 2 blue ticks, I would have done. when the WhatsApp came in, I should have gone, oh no, I would. No, so yeah, I mean, it's an absolute privilege and honour, but mostly it's because it's recognising other people who are recognising the importance of mental health, and how we kind of like generally get the message out there. That we are humans first. We are extraordinary humans. We are incredible beings. And a lot of that is just encouraging people to reconnect.
Yeah.
And just being there for each other. And I know there's that great, I love that there's this great kind of like story of the Chinese emperor who kind of does a deal over a chessboard. And, there's kind of 64 squares on a chessboard, right? And it's a mathematical challenge. I'm not a mathematician, but if you imagine that you placed 1 grain of rice on the first square of the chessboard and you multiplied the grain of rice each time through the 64 squares. So for example, on the second square you had 2, then 4 and 8, 16, so on and so forth. I won't go any further because I can't count beyond 20. But if you got to the 64th square, how many grains of rice would you get? And someone said, a chicken korma? I said, you get more chicken kormas you can know how to deal with, because actually in the entire history of humanity, we've never grown that much rice. Yeah. But the whole point for me is that it's the connectivity, it's the influence. Because don't underestimate the power of just connecting with another human being. And actually, if you connected so well that they kind of went out into humanity and connected with another human that well, it'd be amazing. And that's the answer to your question, really, for me, because that's mental for me. It's about, really encouraging other human beings to connect really deeply and intensely, touching, feeling, smelling other human beings, and letting them know they're not alone.
Genuinely couldn't say it any better than that. Andrew, thank you again for being a judge, but also thank you just for your honesty and for your experience and for your insights today.
Lovely, Scott. Yeah. Thank you, mate.
If you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, then remember, please subscribe on any of the podcast channels. Hopefully you'll be watching this on YouTube, so please hit subscribe. And if you want to learn more about the Mentl Awards 2023, we've got 38 categories covering all industries: public sector, private sector, individuals, empathetic leadership. Check out the link in the show notes and get your entry in today. Andrew, thanks for being on The Mental Space.
Yeah, love you, man. Take care.